Tennessee State Senator Ramesh Akbari has also been pushing for job growth in the state, and she's here to share more about her perspective. Senator, thank you so much for being here. So we talked a little bit with Mayor Jim Strickland about his own specific efforts that he's made. Can you talk to us about what you're hearing from your constituents? I mean, are the efforts being felt, and what's the next step in progress for citizens?
Well, I think there are a lot of barriers beyond the jobs being available that are holding people back. Childcare is a major issue, transportation is a major issue, and certainly with the pandemic, many people have had to recalibrate their entire lives. Education is important, and there's some things we're doing on a state level to help with that. But the workforce, I think, is eager. We just have to try and help provide some of those social supports that will make it easier for them to be able to fulfill those jobs.
And can you talk a little bit about what that looks like? Because for many people, we were at the Civil Rights Museum, the National Civil Rights Museum, and for many people, Memphis is known for that. But there's an increasing push to have job growth, to have support for people in the state. So how do you do that? How do you sort of change the narrative of the city and the state?
Well, one, you need to have a robust public transportation system. That's really what's lacking in Tennessee and in Memphis in particular. I'm hoping that some of these federal funds that have come down to the states and cities and this new infrastructure bill will help with that. But that is a major barrier. If you don't have a vehicle, it is impossible for you to get to a job in a reliable and timely fashion. Imagine if you live in, let's say, North Memphis and you have to work in East Memphis, where a lot of the development is occurring. You might have to take 2 or 3 buses, and if any one of them is not on time, then you're late for work, which means you're a bad employee, which means you possibly will lose that job. So that is a real barrier, but I think that we can fix it.
Is fixing it contingent on having support from lawmakers in Washington?
Certainly. It really is a funding issue. A lot of the infrastructure needs that have to take place will require funding from Washington. And the good thing is, with the historic infrastructure law, I do think that we'll have better ways to support public transportation and to support our roadways, which will help folks.
And from where you're sitting, Senator Akbari, there is a lot happening in Nashville, and there's a lot of concern about how things are changing and how potentially how politics are shaping in the state could affect people there. What is your concern about redistricting? I mean, how could that potentially affect any of the progress that you and your colleagues are trying to make for Memphians and for Tennessee in general?
Well, you just have to look at Nashville, and with the 5th congressional district, the Republican Party's map completely shattered that district. So you had a voting base within the core of Nashville, a 28% African American population that was split up into 3 different districts. And so what that does is that completely dilutes their vote, which means that their politics, their choices, their interests do not matter as much. Now, our cities are blue, but our state is probably as red as it can get. So I do think that it becomes a really difficult position that corporations are being placed in when they decide to move to Tennessee. I mean, we have Amazon, we have FedEx, International Paper, Oracle, Nissan, so many great companies here, but their national policies and international policies do not align with many of the things that we do in this state. And that is a problem when you talk about long-term growth.
What do you do then you're one person, but you, of course, have a different perspective than many people, considering you are a woman of color as well. How do you do that? I mean, how do you get people on board to sort of spread this message that you are trying to share?
Well, one, we've partnered with the Chambers of Commerce. A lot of corporations have stood up and said, listen, this is completely unacceptable. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's a people issue. For me as a legislator, I try and make things clear when I'm in committee or on the floor. This is who you're hurting. It might sound like a good political issue for you, but this is actually impacting and hurting people. Like, you look at some of the legislation surrounding education, LGBTQ kids. These are policies are hurting real families. It's not about you winning political points within your district. And I try and kind of be that conscience. And I think sometimes I do reach some of my colleagues.
And what's the next barrier for you, Senator Akbari? I mean, what is it that is on your mind this year, 2022, considering all of the issues that we've been talking about today and sort of moving forward?
Well, certainly trying to address some of the disparities that the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted: access to health care, access to education, the disparities between Black and Brown folks and how they survived the pandemic. Trying to make things right, make people whole, not the same as they were, but better. And I think that's really been my focus. A big part of that starts with education, making sure that our state system is properly funded so our kids get the resources that they need, not just education, but the social services as well.
And Senator Akbari, just finally, we're talking to you. You are a state senator currently right now. Would you ever consider potentially running for senator of Tennessee? I mean, is a federal position in your future, in your near future, to continue pushing the message that you are pushing today?
Well, I say never. I was elected in 2013. And as my mother always says, go in the place where you can serve the most people. And so we'll see what happens.
All right, Senator Akbari, we'll have to have you back on. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching Bloomberg Quicktake Now. Subscribe to our channel to see the biggest stories the moment they happen from around the world. And tune in to our 24/7 live stream for global news coverage, documentaries, interviews, deep dives, and shows on the stories that you care most about.